In this video, we are going to talk about why I held on to my depression. I am Pauline, and I am so happy you are here because a lot of fearful avoidants are struggling with mental health in some respect. It could be OCD, it could be generalized anxiety, it could be depression, it could be a combination of those. And in my 20s, I struggled with all three, and depression was the one that stayed the longest. Um, and I have to preface this by saying this is a very personal account, a very personal story. I am not saying that depression works like this for everyone, or that there is always a choice to hold on to a depression. There are so many reasons that one could have a depression. So I am not saying that my story is your story, or that you could just choose to not have a depression anymore. I really want you to know that. But I also want you to know that it is a possibility that there is an psychological or emotional component involved. And I have learned that firsthand, and I don't see a lot of people talking about that. Maybe because it's a little bit taboo. We are here to break taboo, so let's just dive into it. Because I do now genuinely see that I held on to my depression, and if you would have said that, if you would have told me that while I was in the middle of my depression, I would have probably be really hurt and cry and feel really hopeless because I felt like I was doing everything I could to let go of my depression. And I was working really hard and still functioning, trying to function somewhat, but not really succeeding. It was days and days in bed or on the couch, not changing into my day clothes, just staying in my pajamas all day, every day, with the curtains closed. It's a pretty almost cliche image of a depression. And then after I kind of got out of it, and I did a lot better. And then after I gave birth to my first child, my daughter, 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I had a postpartum depression. So I was very well aware that I was at risk for that, and I thought I had prepared in all the ways, but looking back, the risk factors were still there. And some of the risk factors, just very practical ones, are that if you don't feel financially safe, if you're not in a safe place, that can be a potential risk factor. And we were starting our businesses, working really hard, but having absolutely no idea what we were doing, especially on the finances side. And we lived in a beautiful place that we worked really hard to be able to get there, not work hard by making money so that we would be able to afford it. We were broke, but it was like we were groundkeepers of an estate, and there was a house on that estate that we lived in. And that ended up being way more expensive in monthly costs than we had anticipated. So it felt like we were drowning a little bit. So definitely a lot of financial stress. Then another risk factor is a lot of blood loss, and I did lose a lot of blood during delivery, birth. Not being as supported by your partner, and Aryan was there for me, but looking back, he had a burnout, so we were in a kind of an unhealthy situation where we just had to work too hard. We had so many different things that we had on our plates, and him, definitely, he had a full-time job, he was starting his business, and he was groundkeeper of that estate, and he was doing extra things for the estate, and it was just way and way and way too much, and he did what he could, but looking back, he really had a burnout, so he was not in a right state of mind. So there were a lot of factors that went into me having a postpartum depression, but it was also trauma. It was also my my history with depression. And I'm not sure if I can say that I will never ever in my life have a depression again, but I did really dive into, okay, why do I have this depression? So with everything, I cured my OCD. I don't have OCD anymore whatsoever. Haven't had it for 8 years. Doesn't mean I'm completely free of fear, but it's nowhere near OCD levels. And I did that by really being brutally honest with myself, diving deep and releasing and healing the triggers. And then with generalized anxiety, I did the same. I looked at what the triggers were and what was underlying that, and then I healed that. And I did that for depression, um, and because of that, it went better. It got better, and then the postpartum depression, I had to do that again. There was also I had a lot of how do you say that, nutrient deficiencies. So there were a lot of physical and external factors that played into the depression too. But I also looked into the emotional and psychological part of it, and was really honest with myself. How is this benefiting me? How is this serving me? And these are really hard questions to ask yourself. It was really hard to acknowledge to myself that I was holding on to this depression in a way. But I had to be open to that possibility in order for me to find a way to heal from it and get out of it. So I, with an open mind, just asked myself the question, is there a reason I'm holding on to the depression? Is it benefiting me? Is it serving me in a way? And I just kind of started brainstorming and started noticing, how do you say, being aware of when I would feel more depressed or when I would be triggered more. So this was for months and months and months I was in a depression. It wasn't like it was moments here and there. It was definitely a pretty deep depression. But I just started kind of seeing what was keeping me from getting out, because I noticed that when I started doing things that would really help me, I would fall back into depression. And in a way, if I was being really, really, really honest with myself, it felt good to be depressed. It felt easier than to be happy. And that's a very clear sign that there is some psychological or emotional component to it. Like I said, it's probably never the only thing. I don't want to make it seem like it is. Please also research any physical or other factors that could contribute. But that's what I did, and then I realized there were definitely reasons that I was holding on to my depression, because it was serving me in a way. So this is just a very honest and kind of raw and vulnerable account on why I held on to my depression. And the first was that for me, it felt like the only way I could be taken care of. And because my husband was so overwhelmed, I felt very abandoned in a way. So this was a wound that came up that I wasn't really aware of before I became a mother. But I had to take care of a baby, and that is very intense. If you're a parent, you know that's a lot of work. And that was just so triggering to me, and I never saw that coming, because I had healed so much in the relationship with my father up till that point. But I hadn't really looked at the relationship with my mother. And there were things there too that really needed to be healed. And looking back, I think my postpartum depression on the emotional, psychological side definitely had to do with the relationship with my mother. I don't want to go into that too much, but it was triggering for me to have to take care of another being 24/7, because that's what I felt like when I was a child. Even though my mom really did the best she could, there was definitely some level of parentification there. So my husband was overwhelmed and had to work really hard, had to do a lot of things. And so my solution, my fear brain solution, I was not consciously aware of this, was to be depressed, to pull him in so that he would have to take care of me. And when I started healing this, I could see that this was a pattern that was there way before, also when I was struggling that much in my 20s. But then he always had the time to be there for me. He could always be there for me. And now that was really hard. I was going through one of the hardest phases in my life with a newborn baby. and having to, how do you say that, recover from delivery and everything. And I felt like my husband couldn't be there for me. And my solution was to sink in a deeper depression so that he had to take care of me. That was my coping mechanism that I had picked up from when I was younger. So my unconscious limiting belief was that when I would be happy and would have energy, then he would completely be gone and I would be on my own and I would have to do everything. I would have to take care of the baby all by myself, have to take care of the house all by myself. And that was a little bit the case. He really did what he could and he was amazing looking back with everything he had on his plate, and really him struggling also with a burnout and all the financial stress and everything. He really did everything he could. But there was a lot that was on my shoulders, even though that felt really overwhelming to me. So yeah, it was kind of the solution to pull him back in and make him take care of me. And that was, I think, also the solution when I was younger, to make my mother take care of me. So that was one of the reasons that I really had to heal and let go of. That I was allowed to be taken care of also when I was happy and strong. Then the second one is I needed everything to be perfect, otherwise there would be no use. So I desperately wanted, of course I know a lot about attachment styles and how they form, and I had realized a little bit that I was a perfectionist, that I had perfectionistic tendencies, but I hadn't realized to what extent and how detrimental they were to me and my mental health. So I never really dug deep and healed them, because I felt like they were also a motivator, a driving factor behind building my business and giving everything that I've got. And I didn't want to take that away and kind of get lazy in that sense. So that perfectionism kind of stayed. But then when I became a mother, I wanted it to be perfect for my daughter. I wanted to be perfect for my daughter. And I was, there were triggers. Like, I was not as calm as I was before the birth or before the pregnancy. And I judged myself so harshly for that, because I felt like I had to be this perfectly calm, primal mother that just knew what to do in every second. And the reality is you have this baby and you get to know this baby. You have no idea how they work, what they want, what they need, what their character is like. And I just didn't allow myself that process. I didn't allow myself to make any mistakes. And I demanded of myself that I was super calm, and I wasn't. So I felt stressed also because of all the external factors that I mentioned. There was just too much on my shoulders. The situation we were in wasn't healthy. The living situation, I mean. So it was too much, and I demanded myself to be perfect in that chaos. And looking back, I so wish that I would have given myself grace, that I wouldn't have been as hard on myself. So perfectionism is still the thing I struggle with the most, because it is hard for me to let go, because I would never want to lower my standards on what I provide, like what I do for you. It's I really do want to give my all, and I notice that I'm hesitant to let go of that perfectionism, because I'm scared that I will be more lax in a way. But needing everything to be perfect, because it's otherwise no use. Perfection is very much linked to clinical depression. This is why I'm starting to become more and more passionate about perfectionism and releasing that, because it has such negative effects on so much, and it just pains me that this played into my postpartum depression. But this has always been the case. The periods that I was the most depressed were the periods that I wanted to do it the most perfectly. So the period that I met my husband and we started dating was when my relationship OCDs kicked in, but when I was also very depressed, because I wanted it to be perfect. And it felt like if I didn't do it perfectly, if it wasn't perfect, then it was no use. And then a second period was when I started the interviewing of the 100 couples who had been happily married for over 40 years. And I just felt the weight of the responsibility of being able to translate their stories in the best way possible into the book. And that was just, on the one hand, it gave me energy, and on the other hand, I was struggling so much. And then the third period was becoming a mom. And I definitely wanted to be perfect in that. Also starting the business, by the way, that was another period. I was really struggling with depression. So many periods. But yeah, the perfectionism part is definitely a big reason why I kind of, the depression gave me the excuse of why it wasn't perfect. Like if I didn't feel good, then that was an excuse of why it wasn't perfect. So I was trying really hard to make everything perfect, but perfect is an unattainable standard, so you're always failing. And to kind of cope with that failing, I would just hold on to the depression, because that will be an excuse of why I didn't get everything perfect, why I couldn't attain that. And then the third reason is I was afraid he would abandon me. So apart from him wanting him to take care of me, I was so afraid that if I would not be depressed, he would not have a reason to stay with me. And in talking to a lot of other people about depression in relationships, when they also have a relationship, I hear this a lot, that the only reason my partner stays with me is because I'm depressed, is what your fear brain is telling you. It's probably not a conscious thought. But holding on to your depression to make somebody stay is very common, I think, in talking to a lot of people about this. So I had to really work on my self-worth and see that my depression is definitely not the reason why he's staying with me, out of obligation and out of guilt of not wanting to leave. So it's almost like a tool of manipulation in that way. And I was using it. In that way to make sure that he would stay with me. So I had to really take responsibility for that and work on my self-worth. And then the fourth was that I'd have to take responsibility. So the depression gave me an excuse to not take responsibility for myself, for my life, for taking care of myself, for doing the things I had to do. It just gave me an excuse to sink in this hole and hide from the world, really. And that was the part that made it feel easier than being happy, because I felt like if I was happy and had energy, then I would have to do all the things that everybody wanted me to do. I would have to meet all the expectations. So I had to learn how to put up boundaries, and I had to learn that I get to decide what to do with my time and energy. And that helped so much in releasing the depression, and then also kind of healing my relationship with responsibility. That responsibility is not a bad thing or a scary thing. It's okay to take responsibility, because it's also okay to make mistakes even when you have a lot of responsibilities. So that helped a lot too in releasing the depression. And then also, nobody is allowed to be mad at you when you're struggling. So it was also kind of a protection mechanism where, as long as I was depressed, as long as I was struggling so much, I felt like I had almost a power tool to say, if somebody would get mad, like, how dare you get mad? Don't you see I'm struggling this much? That was also a really hard one to let go of, because it kind of feels like a safety blanket, like as a fearful avoidant, you're so afraid that people get mad at you for no reason or for good reason. And then you kind of collect these safety blankets, these reasons why you're failing or why you're not good enough. And then to face them and to let them go is so scary, because you think that will mean that people will get mad at you more and they will have a reason, and that's not safe. So I had to really learn that other people being angry is not my fault, it's not my problem, and it's not okay if they try to intimidate me in that way with anger. That is not a healthy thing on their part. So healing that really helped me in not needing the depression as a safety blanket in case somebody would get mad, so that I could kind of guilt trip or emotionally manipulate them into feeling bad about themselves because I was struggling so much. So yeah, there was a lot of, confronting myself with things that I didn't want to let go of because they felt more safe. But I wanted to be healed more than I wanted to have the illusion of being safe, and that in the end helped me to let go of the depression. Like I said, I don't know if I can guarantee that I will never ever be depressed anymore. Maybe there's more reasons, maybe there's more triggers, but yeah, it letting go of these emotional and psychological factors has definitely helped. They were the ones that kind of kept that depression locked in, tied in. So please let me know in the comments below. I do feel a little bit vulnerable talking to you about this, telling all of this, because I definitely don't want you to feel like I'm judging anybody that has a depression. Even if you are struggling because of these reasons, it's not that I'm saying that you're a bad person if you hold on to a depression, or that you should let go of everything. That's completely your choice. I don't ever want you to feel like you have to do anything to be worthy. You are worthy as you are. Um, I'm just sharing this part of my story to let you know that maybe you didn't know that this could play a part. So let me know in the comments whether this was valuable to you, whether you got something out of this. And as always, I am so happy you are here, and I will see you in the next one. Healed and Happy is a tailor-made online program where me and my team personally guide you through healing the roots of a fearful avoidant attachment style.